Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of February of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Avdiivka direction. According to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours lost 410 soldiers, 1 tank, 3 infantry fighting vehicles, 4 armored fighting vehicles, 2 mortar vehicles, as well as 1 D-30 howitzer. Also, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of very heavy clashes, the Russians managed to clear and to establish complete control over the village by the name of Lastachkina. This information was provided and confirmed by the Ministry of Defense, so this is a very strong evidence and we have the right to color the territory. Furthermore, according to published geolocation, the Russians, as a very difficult offensive operation, as a very hard assault, managed to establish control over the southern village, by the name of Severnaya. On this, for example, footage, we can see the Russian drone flying above the territory, and also we can see the Russian infantry and Russian soldiers who were moving from one building to another. Obviously, the most of the forces moved further in direction of Toninka, and there were very heavy clashes in the vicinity and inside of the village that located to the northwest of Severnaya. But this, the main purpose of these forces were to clear the territory, to secure the area, and to establish safe supply roads from Donetsk to this area. On this video, for example, on this episode, we could see how the Russian soldier thrown grenade inside of the basement, trying to clear this territory completely. So as you can see, we have colored this territory as well. And now let's move further. What is happening right now in direction of Toninka and Orlovka, the next two towns that lays in front of the main Ukrainian defense belt that goes through the villages of Yasnobrodovka, then to Orlovka and the water reservoirs Semyonovka, Berdychi, and then to Ocheretina. So this is the main defense belt, and the Russians are about to get this line. Now let's start with Toninka. According to information we have from different reliable sources, from pro-Russian sources, neutral sources, pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians conducted a very successful offensive operation inside of the village as well, and currently there are very heavy clashes inside of this territory. Currently we still haven't received even a single geolocated confirmation of the clashes, but all, let's say, the updates about Severnaya and Lastachkina were confirmed today, so I think that it's very likely that the very heavy clashes there and the Russians are pushing further. When talking about the northern direction, there are a lot of very interesting updates are coming from Orlovka, and we have already seen significant number of geolocations. Different mappers start making their own analysis how the clashes are going to take place in this direction. I will try to summarize everything and I will provide you my own opinion, because everything is not so simple about Orlovka as you can think from the first sight. First of all, to understand the situation in Orlovka, we need to add the water reservoirs and lakes. This is the first water reservoir, and also this is the first water barrier. This is the second one that goes through from Orlovka to Berdychi. This is the second defense belt and the second natural barrier and the second water reservoir, and this is the third one that lays between Avdiivka and Orlovka itself, and the final natural defense belt, natural barrier, is the water reservoirs that goes from Orlovka to Lastachkina, this one. So if you take a look at this configuration of Orlovka defense, Orlovka defense belt, we can tell that there are not so many options for the Russians how to storm this area. For example, if the Russians try to attack the Ukrainians from the south, from Toninka to the north, obviously they will be stopped on these along this river between these two water reservoirs, and very unlikely the Russians are able to bypass this territory. If the Russians take a decision to attack from the east, let's say from Lastachkina, there is another, let's say, defense belt between these two water reservoirs. And as if we take a look at this configuration, we understand that possibly and the only reasonable and the only acceptable option for the Russians to attack Orlovka is to attack these village from the north, from the chemical plant first to the tree lines, and after from tree lines to the west in direction of the farms and barracks that located on the northeast of the village. So basically the Russians, first of all, and this is the vital question for them, to establish control over these farms, and this will mean the complete collapse of Orlovka defense belt, and the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back further to the Ukrainian side of these water reservoirs. So basically the Ukrainians will be forced to step back in this direction, to fall back in this direction. But when talking about this plan, about this configuration of possible Russian attack, we are saying that everything is okay in Russian and in Ukraine army. I'm not saying by saying okay that either the Ukrainians or Russian are winning. I'm talking about that the situation is critical but stable. I'm talking about supply, I'm talking about support, I'm talking about reserves and so on. But when talking about current situation, yes, the situation is okay for Russia. They have significant number of let's say tanks, they have significant number of missiles, they have probably endless resources, endless reserves, they don't have any problems with artillery rounds and missiles, so the Russians can continue offensive operation further without having any risks. But when talking about the Ukrainians, we know that they have significant number of problems. They still haven't adopted mobilization law. The Ukrainians don't have possibilities to use artillery shells in the same quantity and numbers that the Russians can do. They don't have armored vehicles, they don't have production of armored vehicles. Very unlikely they have some production and service centers to fix and repair armored vehicles. So a lot of problems. So I'm trying to say that very likely that if the Russians attack, let's say Orlovka using this road, let's say the main attack, or if the Russians take a decision to attack Orlovka from the south, very likely the Ukrainians will be collapsed and will be forced to step back as soon as they see the first Russian flags or the first Russian infantry or tanks heading on this direction. Maybe the Ukrainians will try to let's say resist for a few days, but obviously they will be collapsed very soon. Once again, if the situation for the Ukrainians are stable and okay, of course the Russians can attack just from the north. But if the situation is critical for them, and I think that the situation is critical, obviously the Ukrainians will be collapsed very soon on the line defense belt between Orlovka and Toninka and will be forced to fall back further to the west. Additional important updates are coming from the north in direction from Berdichi. Very interesting video and very rare to tell the truth. I was very shocked and surprised. First, let's take a look at this video. For example, on this video we can see the United States Abrams moving from one side along Centralna Street in Berdichi from one position to another. Maybe the Ukrainians were using Abrams to attack the Russians in a chemical plant in the vicinity of Stepova, and when the Abrams was empty, they took a decision to move these Abrams as far as possible from the line of combat contact. But according to information we have, this didn't help the Ukrainians, because I was really surprised when they were moving in this area, because when I saw this video for the first time, the first thing that came to my mind that Ukrainians tried to bring Abrams as close as possible to the Russians to give them more chances to destroy the Abrams. For example, on the same intersection of the roads today in the morning was published another video of how the Russians managed to discover and to destroy another Ukrainian Bradley. So it was obviously a suicide operation for Ukrainians to use Abrams so close to the line of combat contact and so close to a chemical plant. So obviously they maybe had a purpose to destroy Abrams or something like this. And later we got two more geolocations, two more videos from Avdiivka direction. The quality of the video is not so good, but according to the author of this video, we can see the first Abrams that was destroyed in Ukraine. Obviously, this is a significant strike not just against Abrams, but also against Joe Biden and the reputation of United States production of military equipment. And later we got additional photo of Abrams from another better angle, and this is the image of the first destroyed Abrams tanks on the territory of Ukraine. So as we can see, the Abrams that was running somewhere in the vicinity of Berdichi was successfully destroyed probably a few minutes later. But this is not the last updates from the territory. Also somewhere from Avdiivka direction we got very interesting video of how the Russians managed to discover and to destroy the Ukrainian artillery system by the name of Archer. And according to information we have, this artillery system has the longest range among the Ukrainian artillery systems they have currently in their military forces. And as you can see, this artillery system was destroyed as a result of a Lancet strike. Furthermore, later we got additional updates about the person and about the commander of the squad who managed to discover and to destroy Ukrainian Abrams. This is the commander of the reconnaissance team Black Gusari. 15th Brigade of Armed Forces of Russian Federation, and he was exactly the man who control and command the Russian forces who destroyed the first M1A1 Abrams of 47th Mechanized Brigade of Armed Forces of Ukraine. Furthermore, we got additional updates from the same territory. Some Russian sources, very reliable sources, start posting the maps and start posting some pictures telling that currently there is some intensifying of actions on the northern part of Avdiivka, not just in the western direction of Orlovka and Очеретино and Селидово, but also the Russians activated in direction of Keramik, Очеретино and Novgorodskaya. So according to information we have, at 1 p.m. of the local time, the Russians start bombing and attacking this territory, and that was a very heavy artillery preparation. Very likely the upcoming night or the next morning we're going to receive more updates about some Russian advances and Russian progress in direction of Очеретино from the northern flank through Keramik, Arkhangelsk, something like this. And this possibly the next Russian movements and next Russian attack of Avdiivka direction. Now we are moving to Bakhmut Artyomovsk area. We got significant number of details and geolocations. We managed to clarify the line of combat contact according to information we received during the day. As you can see, we have changed the map and we have increased the territory under Ukrainian control because we have geolocations, and probably this is the configuration of this line of combat contact. And when I saw this configuration for the first time today after I updated the map, this thing completely reminded me the situation in Avdiivka, the situation in Bakhmut. Basically, this is another cauldron of armed forces of Ukraine on Ivanovsky direction. Of course, we can't say that there are thousands or tens of thousands of soldiers, probably a few hundreds, but the situation for them also develops not in their favor. First, let's take a look at the video to the south of the defense belt by the name of Bel. The Russian sources published another video of how they were storming and clearing this territory, and as a result of attack, they managed to establish complete control over this part of the forest. But since the beginning of the battle for Ivanovskaya, we still haven't received even a single geolocated confirmation confirming the control of armed forces of Russian Federation over this forest. So which confirms that the next steps of the Russian army is going to be to establish control over this territory. So obviously within the next few days we're going to receive the first updates of clearing operation inside of this forest. Furthermore, we got some geolocations from the southern part, from the northeastern part of Ivanovska. The video was published, and on that video we might see the FPV drone strikes of armed forces of Ukraine against the Russian positions along this water reservoir. So basically this is the edge position. At least by the morning of 26th of February, these water reservoirs was the edge positions of the armed forces of Russian Federation on the northeastern part of Ivanovska. And also we got FPV drone strike from the Russian side against the Ukrainian positions in front of Bakhmut or to the southwest of Kromova. So all these geolocations gave us like understanding of the real situation in this area, and as we can see, the situation is not very good for the Ukrainians. Obviously, if the Russians are able to establish control over this forest, the forces of Ukrainian army on these positions, on the edge northeastern positions, this one will be forced to fall back to the central part, and very likely the Ukrainians are going to start doing this very soon. So the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back to the central part, and after that the Russians will continue movements from the north along these three lines, and they will enter Ivanovskaya, the intersection of Shirokaya and Sadova Street, and this is going to be probably the end of the battle for the village as well. So as soon as the Russians enter this territory, this is going to be the end. Furthermore, we got some updates from the eastern part and the central part as well. During the previous days, we got lots of updates about further Russian attack along Shosseyna Street and Osvetana Street and the eastern street, but today we got geolocations confirming that the Russians haven't managed to enter the central part, that they're still in the eastern part of the village. On this video we can see FAB strikes against the positions of Ukrainian army in this area. This video was geolocated, which confirms that probably this is exactly the territory under Russian control. So approximately, more or less, this configuration corresponds to the reality. And the same video, almost the same video we got from the N32 road from the north in direction of Ivanovska. On this video we can see how the Russian armed forces, multi-launch rocket system of the armed forces of Russian Federation, was attacking this territory, and this video confirms confirms that this intersection of N32 road with streets and roads inside of Ivanovska is still under Ukraine control. Anyway, the battle is just at the very beginning, but the situation continued developing not in Ukrainian favor. When talking about Chasiv Yar, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the blocks, the eastern block of the city. On this video, we can see how the Russians were bombing the residential area on the Russian side of Canal. And a few seconds later, we got the video of the use of cluster rounds along the railways. This is the cluster rounds. This is the area of the use of cluster rounds. So this video confirms that the Russians still haven't managed to bypass this territory. There's still lots of work to do, but the Russians probably on the way to success. And we got additional video from Chasiv Yar. On this video we see another FAB, another strike, FAB 1500 or FAB 500, and this is the new Russian tactics. They establish complete air superiority. They don't care about Ukraine air defense. They can do whatever they like, and obviously it's very difficult for the Ukrainians to stand under such a heavy pressure, and sooner or later, after a few such strikes, obviously the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back. Now we are moving further to Sever's direction. During the previous day we haven't received anything from this territory, as well as we haven't received anything from the southern and the northern Kupiansk direction. That means that the operational pause on this direction continues, but as we discussed, according to the most of the sources, soon something big is going to happen here. Now we are moving to the Zaporizhzhia, Kherson direction to be more precise. We haven't received anything from Rabotino for the previous 24 hours, and this is very strange and weird. For some reason we stopped receiving any updates. The only important thing we got today is that Tokmak was visited by the Chief or General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russian Federation, First Deputy Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, General of the Army Valery Gerasimov. He is responsible for the special military operation. His visit in Tokmak probably had some purposes. Probably he brought the final orders and the final plans to the general and commander of this direction, and very likely and very soon we need to expect additional movements of the Russian forces on this area. Furthermore, we got a very interesting video from Zaporizhzhia. This video was geolocated, and on this video, for example, we can see the Nazam's air defense system. The Russians managed to discover the system, and after that, as a result of Tornado air strike, that system was completely destroyed. So we see that the Russians also continue securing the sky above Zaporizhzhia area by destroying the air defense forces of armed forces of Ukraine. If the Russians are able to do this, it will ease the use of aircrafts and to bomb Orekhov, Gulay Polya with different types of bombs, and of course it will allow the Russians to create a stable attack roads for further offensive operation deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. So once again, the situation for the Ukrainians in Zaporizhzhia area develops not in their favor. When talking about Krinky area, we haven't received anything, just another HIMARS strike from the Ukrainian side, and also we got the video of bombing of another ammo depot in this direction. Very likely the Ukrainians were keeping and storing their missiles for HIMARS systems, maybe missiles for air defense forces, or maybe some pieces of this let's say equipment. Anyway, the Russians managed to destroy at least something. Now we are moving to Kiev, and we continue receiving significant number of updates from the territory. According to the local information, the Ukrainians continue developing defense belt around Kiev, and according to the sources, the Ukrainians and the Zelensky himself prepare Kiev for the second offensive operation from the Russian side. So they do everything they can to increase the defense possibilities and capabilities of the capital of Ukraine. Probably the most important update we got from the Ukrainian parliament, as we discussed in the previous videos, the Ukrainians have adopted demobilization law. So in the very near future, probably tomorrow or the day after, maybe in a week, we're going to receive the number that Ukrainians are planning to demobilize. And if the Ukrainians are going to demobilize, let's say 100,000 soldiers, this is one picture. But if the Ukrainians, 30,000 soldiers, but if the Ukrainians are planning to demobilize 200,000 or 300,000 soldiers, this is going to mean exactly what we were talking during the previous videos. By demobilization, the Ukrainians try to hide the real losses. They will demobilize probably 10 times less, but you need, of course, to replace demobilized forces with mobilized forces, and this demobilization the Ukrainians and Zelensky himself is going to use as the good thing to start a total mobilization of entire Ukraine for the war with Russia. Additional reports we received from Western, very worried reports from Western countries. The most important one is that according to the Prime Minister of Slovakia, some European Union and NATO countries are considering the possibility of sending their military to Ukraine on the basis of bilateral agreements, said Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico. This is a very important piece of news because by 26th of February, the Ukrainians signed security agreements with Canada, with United Kingdom, with France, with Germany, with Italy. The Ukrainians still haven't signed agreement with United States of America, and probably they will not be able to do this until the end of the election cycle. And probably Poland. I don't remember whether they managed to sign this agreement with Poland or not, but we see that there is already coalition of very powerful countries, European countries. And today another report we got from France. Today Macron has called an urgent meeting with the leaders of about 20 Western countries today over Ukraine. They will discuss in particular the possibility of purchasing shells in third countries. And this is like a top of iceberg. Obviously these countries are going to decide how they're going to send forces to the western part of Ukraine. The main purpose of sending forces to Ukraine is not to, let's say, start fighting with Russia, at least on the first phase of this redeployment. The most important goal is to occupy the western part of Ukraine, to create secure buffer zone, and to release forces, police forces, border forces, I don't know, all men this territory have, to the eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, this territory will be occupied and the main police forces, security forces will be under the shoulders and under the responsibilities of the countries that provided Ukraine security agreements. Obviously, you need to understand that the Ukraine has signed 5 security agreements, but it's not just agreements about supply and support. This is also the split of Ukraine for the areas of responsibilities. Ukraine have already signed something that Germany signed after the end of the Second World War, when Germany was split into several sectors between Allies and Soviet Union. Ukraine signed the same story. Every single country like Canada, Poland, let's say, has, or France have the area of responsibility in Kiev. For example, United Kingdom has the area of responsibility in Odessa. Let's say Italy has the area of responsibility in the western part of Ukraine. Germany, let's say, has in the vicinity of Rovna. So something like this. The territory has already been splitted by the western countries, and everybody will be responsible for its own territory. And at the last, according to information we have, Hungary adopted the acceptance of Sweden to the NATO union, and this is another member, and this is a not very good piece of news for the Russians. And today the Russians, according to all these, let's say, changes in NATO, took a decision to split the western military, let's say, western military sector into 2 parts. The first one is Leningrad military sector, and the second one is Moscow. So the Russians are planning to increase the number of forces, and obviously the situation is going to escalate more. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and